We took the piece off and we rounded the edges here, so that's nice and smooth. It's flush with the edges of the fingerboard, and so that's pretty much all installed. The only thing on this one we're going to have to do, as I keep saying, is we're going to have to cut the slots. Here's the original nut piece that was on here, and if we offer it up behind the nut, you can see exactly where the strings need to be cut. Now obviously we can take a ruler and we can go from first principles, but this nut was actually a really beautifully cut nut, as they often are in the tailor factory, and the spacing is just beautiful. And so we're going to transfer the markings for the slots onto there and cut in some grooves ready to go. Okay, we've moved ahead with the nut here, but I'm going to go back over how we've actually gone and measured out and cut the slots. Now, we used the existing nut, which is what I said before, to measure out the spacing on this, and with using a pencil we marked on the exact positions of where the strings will go. Once we'd actually marked them on, front and back, we connected them up with a line. I did take a little craft knife, like an X-acto knife, and very carefully made a score, so that like a starting point for a saw or a file to go into. So I'd make a score for the line where the string will go. The next step, just to get started, I've got a very fine little saw here, very fine teeth, and I lined that up with where it had to go. Now I didn't cut very far with this, because obviously you want to only just make enough for the string to rest in until you actually adjust the height to be just perfect. So take this saw, it's a very fine tooth saw. This one came from our friends at Stuart McDonald once again, and the fine teeth on this, they're only 10,000th of an inch on this particular one, but we have other ones that go up to about 25 thou. But certainly the fine one's a good place to start when you're just cutting all the slots. So we'd line it up with the little score line that we put on there, and we go backwards and forwards, just cutting a little groove in there. Now we don't want to go too far, and the other thing that you'll observe is that we keep the line higher at the front than at the back. This makes a clean pathway, but keeps the edge point of the nut at the highest point, so that the string knows where the start of the nut is. The other tools that we also use are these. These are precision nut files. There's a few different types of these. We really like these type with the slightly triangular end shape top and bottom, and each file has two different cutting sizes, and you can see that I've actually written on mine to remind me which side is which, so that when we put it in the slot and cut with that. Now when you're cutting the slot here, you're actually trying to get it so that the string has about 10,000ths of an inch clearance over the first fret here. Now you can go and get a conversion for that for millimeters, but 10 thou is what we're looking for. The other tool which I find comes in useful here is a set of feeler gauges. Now we use these a lot in the workshop, and the way in which I use this on this job is I measure a stack of feeler gauges that comes to exactly the same height as the first fret. So I put a little something over the two frets, and I just get to the point where maybe 2 or 3 feeler gauges just is enough to only just scrape through under the little ruler or whatever I put here. Now when I've got that, I add an additional piece to there, and I might add, in this case I might take 15,000th of an inch, and putting it under, I'm using it as a guide for the file. So if we move one of these strings out of the way, I get the right size file for the slot. So for this slot we're going to use 42 thousandths of an inch gauge, and we just go through, keeping the front of the slot higher than the back, and we're just filing down until the file just kisses the metal of the feeler gauge. We've got it so that the feeler gauge is pushed right up against the front piece of the nut here. We're not going right across, because obviously the Earvana nut zigzags in and out, so it's important that we get it just tucked in there. So we've got the actual height of the fret plus about 15 thou. And when the metal of the file comes into contact at that very front edge with the feeler gauge, you'll notice that the sound will go from the normal sound of filing plastic to a metallic sound, and that's the noise that tells you to stop. So we'll file away, just making a nice clean cut until we get that metallic sound, and that will tell us to stop. And we'll do that for each of the strings. Obviously the skinnier strings will use the skinnier size file, the thicker size strings will use the appropriate sized nut file there. So for the thickest one I might use a 50,000th of an inch file, and we'll just go there. Now these ones we've already been working on, and we're just about at that magical point where you've got next to no clearance over that first fret, but there's enough of an air gap that when you play the note it doesn't vibrate against the fret itself. When we were filming with the acoustic, we actually forgot to film this bit, but I've gone back with an electric because the principle's completely the same, just to discuss the final placement of the nut itself. The screws go into these slots, which are actually elongated circles, so the nut can be moved backwards and forwards. Now if you start off with the nut in its furthest back position, tune up the guitar and set the intonation as you would normally, comparing the open note to the 12th fret fretted. Once you've actually got that set up on an electric guitar like this one, you would come back to the nut here and you would do a comparison. You play the note open and then you play the note fretted at the first fret. Now if the note open is tuned perfectly to E, and when you fret the note at the F, if the note is slightly sharp, you need to move the nut slightly towards the first fret. So you'll do comparison of the open to the fretted at the first. If it's slightly sharp, you move it forward. Same again on the bass side, and you'll move the nut forward until both those notes are exactly spot on, dead in tune on the meter. And when you've done that, lock it all down and you're good to go.